There we go. All right, guys, let's get started. There's about 30 people in here. There was about 60 something that registered. So I anticipate that more people will be coming in as we continue to roll out. But first things first, I'm just going to say hi, guys. Thanks so much for taking a moment out of your busy and incredibly beautiful day of a Thursday evening to be with us today, just to go over and have what's called a roundtable discussion, all about the things that I feel like are happening right now. Like there's a lot of movement, a lot of discussion in media, and just, I know personally, we've been having a lot of discussions about what's happening come the fall. And everyone's kind of like on edge because there's this big influx. Thank you, Corona or COVID-19. But the reality is the one reason why we wanted to do this was because we wanted to put it out there and actually just kind of have this open, candid discussion and focus on the reopening of school in the fall and what that's going to look like or what that could potentially look like moving forward. Okay, so I don't even know about you guys, but I know I'm speaking from a space of being a parent, and I guess I should introduce myself. I act as if everyone knows who I am, but my name is Myrna Durrami, and I am the proud parent of a now second grader and fifth grader at Rockbridge Academy. And I mean, to me, like I said, I've been feeling like if it's not a parent that's talking to me about like either what they went through their homeschooling, as they call it, situation, or they're not thinking about what's going to happen in the fall. It's always been a part of the conversation, especially now more than ever. So I think it's really important to have this discussion and have this candid conversation. And I'm loving the fact that they're actually graciously allowing me to help steer and moderate this for you guys, because me as a parent have a lot of the same questions that you guys probably have. So this is, I feel, going to be very valuable and also very pivotal in thinking forward as to how we move forward coming in September. So let's just jump right in. I think we should just introduce all the people that are here because we brought together some amazing team members and administration. So I'm just gonna do the intros just to keep it simple, and then they're gonna dive in and we'll start having some real dialogue about the things we really wanna talk about. So first things first, JD is here, and he is our dialectic literature teacher. And then we have, I'm gonna kind of go the Brady Bunch way because I know different people see different things, but I'm gonna go in my order. So Kim Williams is to the right of me, and she is a grammar teacher who taught the fourth grade last year. And then we have Tammy Rhodes. Now Tammy is a dear friend of mine who I graciously had the ability to work with when Nathan was in kindergarten. But her role is actually going to be switching and transitioning more into IT. So she's our IT administrator come this fall. And then we have Gretchen, which again, I had the honor of working with Nathan in kindergarten, and she is our grammar kindergarten teacher. And she also has been very integral in the part of thinking about what's going to be happening moving ahead in our task force, which we'll talk about a little later. And then we have my dear Rory Griffin, who is our headmaster to the right of her on my screen. And then we have Tammy Keatts, who is our rhetoric science teacher. And then I just noticed that Michelle, I have to do one thing for, my dear. I just realized, because she is not a panelist for this specific conversation. Let me just undo that if I can find it. Some odd reason, Michelle. This is what I need to do. There we go. Disable. Now that I had to disable that one. Now she's not there. Okay, so there we go. There's the Brady Bunch photos that I was looking for. All right, guys. So before we actually really dive in and get into like more of the more meat pressing topics, I wanted to set the stage because I'm always that person to be like, okay, what am I going to get out of this thing? So I'm just going to give you guys an objective view of what we're going to go over, so you have that in your expectations. So first things first, we're going to take a moment to reflect on how last semester was and that journey. And now that the fog has cleared and I feel like people can actually think of it from an objective standpoint, I think it's really good to just kind of look back, reflect on how we actually made it through this transition of live instruction to distance learning. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to go into some of what's happening now, like what are the current happenings, what are Roy and the administration team as well as the staff, what are they actually working on now in order to prepare us for reopening this fall, which that's some exciting stuff that we're definitely going to want to know. And then we're also going to answer some of the more pressing questions that the administration has been getting. And also, just so you know, guys, if you have any questions now, you can definitely put them in the chat. I'm going to do my best to try to look at the chat, because at the end, if we have some time, we're going to try to go into some of those Q&As. But just know that this is being recorded and that we're going to look at all of the questions. And I know it's going to be forwarded directly to the administration so that they make sure that they answer your responses as well. So don't think that it's going to go out of, in blind ears or we're not going to get to them. They are definitely going to get to that. All right, so now that we laid out the lay of the law in terms of what we're going to be doing today or this evening, let's see. First things first, I'm going to start with this. It's funny because I had this talk with some parents because they had just finished school, I think like the end of June in New York. And they were just like having woosah moments, like, I cannot believe we got through this, we did it. So now that we're a little further along, because we finished in May, I want to put this out there to the teachers. I want to ask you guys, just take us back, like to the first few weeks when we started the distance learning, and just like dive into a little bit as to what the beginning of the journey was, like what the anticipation you had going into it. And I guess what I'll do is I'll just like pick someone random. Let's just start with you, JD. Like, start at the beginning, like, when we were like, okay, this is the initiative. We're going to go into this distant learning initiative. And, what was the initiative? What was the plan? And then kind of like walk us through just about some of the things that you learned, especially when you got into the groove of it all.
Yeah, thank you. When we first started, it was only going to be temporary, right? We
Right.
weren't even sure it was necessarily going to go through even to spring break on the front end of things. And one thing that, frankly, I give as a talking point that I'm quite proud of my colleagues in particular in administration about is how fast we were able to make that pivot. And it's not because we're all a bunch of technologically gifted people. I just bought my smartphone is not even a year old. I've never used such a thing until last year, and the only reason I switched that way was because I can no longer buy any other kind of phone but a smartphone. So that's the kind of Luddite you're dealing with, at least in the upper school, and I'm not alone in some of that. So for us to be able to make that switch from teaching in the classroom to really within 4 days, we closed on Thursday, and I think officially it was supposed to be Wednesday. A few of us kind of pushed things and started having them work earlier than that because we cheat, but then we got reprimanded. So the administration's taking care of that problem. They won't let us teachers cheat like that. But to switch within 5 days and to have things running and to have legitimate material being taught, there are a lot of schools out there that didn't make it within a month. So, and then by the end, a lot of schools, and for different reasons, right? We have a group in our school of people who have access to technology, and thank the Lord for that. And we were able to implement. So we don't have some of the obstacles that other schools may have, but it really comes down to our colleagues. Guys like, it annoyed me, Darren Lawing, right, was one who was not the only one, but one of the ones who, pushed Google Classroom and that sort of thing. And many curses I sent in his direction for helping us go that way. But he was right. In the end, those sorts of tools really did help us do the thing we needed to do. They did help us to instruct and have points of contact with our students, which if you're teaching, it's not just about standing in front of people. It's a lot of senses about lots of touches on the ball, right? Lots of opportunities to have contact and to hear. And we were able, again, several iterations of planning, but we were able to continue to have that contact, that we were able to pray with our students at the beginning of class sessions. We were able to continue to give instruction and to continue to build on what we had already established previously in the year. And that's a testament to really an entire campus or a set of colleagues who are really dedicated to seeing this stuff happen and desperately want our students to learn the things that God has allowed us to teach them to make them better people. So it's about dedication, not savvy, and teamwork, frankly. So it was not fun, and I'm glad
No,
it was.
not, yeah, it
It
wasn't
was
necessarily
not
fun.
fun.
It wasn't
Yeah,
fun
I
for the
agree. I
parents
wouldn't
either.
say it was the party. But to your point, I mean, from a parent's angle of this, you know, again, not knowing, because you know, when you're in your world, you know, everything's kind of like you're in that bubble for a little bit. It was amazing for me to learn from the outside that people like 2 weeks in, like we're still just like we're just trying to figure it out. Like they had no direction, nothing was being done. So, I mean, that was like the aha moment for me as a parent where I was like, oh my gosh, I was like Rockbridge. And it had me like more than grateful, you know, super like, I don't know, excited. And the fact that the pivot and the shift happened so quickly, where it was like all hands on deck. And I mean, I'm going to go to Kim on this next because she and I went through this together. So Kim, if you could elaborate and just share like just a little bit of your pivot. And I know you had a couple of things, but it was like once it was streamlined and it was so quick, it was amazing.
Yeah, I would say that as far as the pivot, prior planning prevents poor performance. And I have to say at Rockbridge, prior planning happens. I mean, it's already happening. Lots of committees have already been formed, working behind the scenes to plan for all sorts of different mountains we're not sure we need to climb. But we're going to plan for it because that's what we do. And I was amazed when I first started coming into this community. Well, my Sarah just graduated, so we've been here now 13 years. I have 2 other children here, and I knew I wanted to be part of this team because of the professionalism of the teachers I saw, of the community, the families that I met. And so that planning, you know, it looked like it was seamless, but there'd already been done a lot of work ahead of time. And so long range plans, you know, from the beginning of the year to the end, every single teacher knows what they want to teach. Now, how we teach it was definitely different. What we had to do was different, but because that piece was done, we could pivot. And then we could actually be creative in different ways. I'd have to say in my own family, I never ever ever thought I would hear myself say, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you know when I post the next video. I mean, who would have think I would ever say that? I'm just turned 50. And so there was a bridge in my home. I have 3 teenagers in my home. So there was a bridge to my own kids. And I really feel like as a whole with Rockbridge and the student population, there was a little bit more of a connection technology-wise with our students too. They're going to be going into a world of technology. We've come from a different world, and now the Lord brought this bridge together. So I found that wonderful. And then one other thing I want to say about this pivot is, you know, sometimes having a new challenge really, you know, makes you be creative in different ways. And so it really was, you know, I not that I want to go back to it, but like I recorded a bunch of Bible videos and I loved doing it. It was super fun. I could have never done that in the classroom.
I love that. I love
Listen
that.
to them again and, you know, rewind and watch. The other thing I loved was being able to, Myrna, walk into your kitchen and have breakfast and not only see Jordan, but also see Nathan, and I could, you know, watch you making dinner, and I could kind of get a sense of the extended family unit in a whole nother way, which was a blessing. I mean, if with 4th graders, I don't always see moms and dads in the classroom anymore. And I don't often see siblings either. So like to get a bigger picture of the family. And that's what we're about at Rockbridge is families.
Yeah.
Families raising the next generation for Christ. And so that was super exciting. And so, you know, younger brother or younger sister got to hear their older siblings asking for prayer requests. And they got to hear Mandy Ball singing hymns and hearing her daughter play the piano over Zoom. I mean, it's not the same, but it was beautiful. And those things couldn't happen without this distance learning. Now, do we want to be back in the classroom when we start out? Absolutely. I can't imagine having this, having this distance learning in the very beginning of the school year. We already had relationships established with families. And that is another thing I want to say is that without the families, this wouldn't have been a pivot like that either. We have lots of parents who are on our side in a lot of ways. They know it's their, it's their main role to raise up their kids, and we're the helpers coming alongside. And so they were poised and ready. And, we were training up each other and the kids at the same time, but we were pulling on the same side of the rope. And that was beautiful too.
That was beautiful. I mean, I will say, even just from my own experience with you too, my dear, like watching you and how you were using, your discipleship through technology, like your reflections that you used to have with like the Bible verses and that kind of thing was so much of a blessing. So I was going to actually ask you about that, but you kind of just touched on it. But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that, one of the beautiful things that I felt through this was the continued connection. Something that I teach a lot of my clients is, COVID-19, yes, all of the influx that it brought us, but it's three things that it did do very well. And it allowed us to learn how to connect in a way that we're not necessarily used to connecting. It allowed us to learn how to communicate, and it allowed us to establish and even build even further community. And I think from us, especially here at Rockbridge, I can actually attest and say, each one of those things was handled with like so much care and so much provision. So just want to say kudos on that. Okay, sorry, I don't want to keep going, but yes, question.
Real quick into that, but I think one of the things that I loved about what Kim said was that there was a reality to it. There, some of the very first videos that I made were just so grainy, and so the mic was really bad, and I kept, getting really up close to it because I couldn't figure out what I was doing. And then at some point I would, the dog would walk through, and then finally I just sort of said to the people, I don't even know if 2 people watched them, right? But I just like, okay, here's my really messy kitchen, and here's the Legos all over the floor. And if that's what your house looks like too, then you're doing a great job, kind of a thing. Exactly. So it's just this sense of, look, I'm doing this too. Like I have a kid here who's trying to figure out his lessons, and you've got kids who are trying to figure out their lessons, and let's pull together as we figure this out. So it felt, what I loved was our administration gave us permission, if you will, to just jump in and try. Like we didn't have to start out perfectly. Yeah. And that not every place that you work has that kind of culture. A lot of places that you work, it doesn't feel safe to not do it 100% right from the beginning, right? We had a safe place that we can say, Denise said to me, I just want you to just put some videos out there for the parents. They're asking for it. And I was like, I've never made a YouTube video in my life. Like, right? So like Kim, subscribe to my channel kind of thing. It was just a hilarious moment. But to just try and figure it out and just put it up there and say, and apologetically say, I'm sorry if these are really scratchy and bad, but this is what I got today. So the permission that we had as the faculty to jump in right away and try. And then as we did it, I'm hoping it got a little better and it got a little more streamlined, and we figured out the glitches as we went. And I just, I have a upcoming junior, and watched him just getting the content from the upper school and making sense of it by himself. And I thought, this is remarkable.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. And, to your point, I remember the beginning, it's like, no one knew how to use Zoom, and it was like all hands on deck.
Super glitchy. Yeah, it was really
glitchy. By the mid to the end point of it, it was like people had backdrops, people had like, all the things. So that in itself, that journey was amazing to watch and be a part of. So I think very, very telling. And to your point, I love the fact that, again, from a parent's perspective, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel very secure knowing that the administration is allowing and empowering you guys to do what you need to do in order to educate my child. So I, again, Roy, and I know some of the other crowd parts are not here, but that's just an amazing testament in itself. So I just have to let you guys know that that's appreciative from a parent perspective, and we appreciate that tenfold. So, all right, so let's just move on into one of the more pressing things, because now we've done the reflection, and if anybody has anything to add to, you know, their experiences, definitely let us know, chime in. But now that we're kind of, you know, over it, we had our woosah moment, we're in summer, and now we're looking forward to the fall and seeing what's going to be forthcoming for that. Why don't we dive into our preparing for that? So I don't know, Roy, you may want to chime in on here. I'm just going to talk about what I know, and then you guys can just go from there. So I do know, I've been privy to the information that there has been a task force that's been enlisted to really hone in, do a deep dive of all the possibilities, all the options, all the tools out there in order to make sure that, you know, we're going to be full-fledged, ready to go. Live instruction is the goal, but we just want to make sure we utilize all the resources to, again, make sure that the plan is in place so that our children will get educated and they'll be nurtured. So with that said, let's talk about preparedness. So what are you guys doing in terms of getting us ready for the fall?
Well, I think, you know, one of the first things that I want everybody to know is that I think we really see this as an opportunity, and we've got to look at it as an opportunity. I mean, the Lord is on his throne. He has brought this about, and he's brought this about for the good of Rockbridge Academy and for the good of our families. And so we're, I think as a team, as a faculty and administration, we're trying to look at it in that way and look at what we're doing with a critical eye to say, where are the opportunities here to do better what we've been doing all along, as well as try to problem solve for the challenges that are obviously here. And while I'm really proud of what our people did to turn this around so quickly in March, and I'm so grateful for our parents. I know, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from people that I really appreciate, that there's a lot of work that's involved. And so if we're to do this in a long-term fashion, and it looks like this is going to be a little more of COVID's going to be a little more of an ice age than we had hoped, then we need to do this well. And we need to really refine what we're doing so that it's sustainable for everyone. This is a great education. My 4 kids have been through it. It is significantly impacted their lives, and we can't just stop because COVID has come along. So what are we going to do? I think this is an opportunity for us to innovate as a school, and that's not something that you typically hear from classical education, you know, as we look back, but it is an opportunity for us to innovate, and also to maybe strip away some of the stuff that has made us very busy people. That's another one of the lessons, I think, of this season that the Lord has given us. And so that's why, you know, in the video I sent out earlier this week, I tried to point to the fact that the task force and the different little teams that are working on various things are seeking to make simplicity and consistency and impact, you know, focusing our impact as kind of these driving guidelines that are shaping what we're doing. Because regardless of what the fall brings, families have to be able to do this and do this well and have confidence that it's going to work well. I'm going to stop right there. I don't want to talk forever.
There you go. So I am gonna put you on the spot, Gretchen, and only reason why, my dear, is because I know that you are part of the task force. And so I know that there has been a lot of prep and a lot of reviews of like good practices, what we're going to keep that we've actually learned and obtained from the spring, and then what we're going to try to incorporate moving forward. So if you could just speak and shed some light and share with us, you know, some of the things that you've been discussing, that'd be great. Sure.
Fairly large group of us has met every Tuesday morning, and the meetings were supposed to be an hour, and now they're most of the day, a lot of the time, well, at least most of the morning. And they're great. We've started out as a whole group, upper school and lower school together, talking about big picture questions, about how, sort of what Kim was talking about, how do we start brick and mortar, how do we start, everybody comes to school on the first day of school, but we're still planning, making sure that our planning almost in a sense is for both. Like we want to plan like we would normally plan every other year, brick and mortar all the way. We're going to be, from September all the way to May, we're going to be in this building and we're going to do our school thing. If Governor Hogan says we have to do something different, we want to make sure we also have a parallel plan for that, right? And so we want to make sure that these two plans intersect each other and can move back and forth really, really well and really smoothly. So there's some things that we want to start at the beginning of the year, getting parents used to, that maybe we wouldn't have done if COVID hadn't come along. So for example, I probably wouldn't have introduced my kindergarten parents to Google Classroom, right off the bat. But I want them to do that now because I want them to know I want to make sure everybody is in the class. I want to make sure everybody knows how to get there. And I want to be sure they can find their newsletter and who's the student of the day. And to do that, you're going to go to your Google Classroom where I normally would have just told you, right? But I want to get you used to going there. So just in case Governor Hogan says we have to do something we don't want to do and distance learning becomes a thing for a little while, that's simple, right? I know that everybody's already plugged in and working. That's a teeny little picture of some of the pretty big questions that we've been tackling in these meetings. And they've been, I know I just keep saying this, but I've worked in lots of different schools. I love working in this school. People have really great communication skills and they work really well together. And I love watching people break off into groups and solving problems and then coming back together and solving bigger problems. And these are pretty complex questions that we're asking and trying to find plans for, because there's so many unknowns and there's so many really important, really critical human needs, right? So these aren't small questions that we're asking and these aren't small needs. These are really important things. So because it's a fairly high level of importance and it's the level of complexity, you can imagine these conversations have been deep and wide and tough and interesting. So we're definitely not done. We have lots of big things to solve.
No, I know. And I'm actually going to turn, because to your point, Tammy Rhodes, my dear, who is now IT administration, is going to be playing a more integral role here too. So I'd love to hear, just some insight from you on what's happening, the current happenings, things that you're processing and working through. That'd be great.
Sure. So speaking with the teaching task force and hearing what they believe will be the best platforms for teaching, we are now looking to see how we can take those platforms like Google Classrooms. Another one we're looking at is Seesaw for the younger kids, and our current student information system called RenWeb, and linking those things together. Both of those now offer integration with RenWeb, and so we're now tackling the task of getting those platforms to talk to one another to make it very easy for the teachers to get their gradebook set up and not have to do it in more than one place, but do it in one place and it syncs with the others. And just looking into those things to make sure that we are helping the teachers as much as we can to do their job, do it well, do it effectively. The things that have stood out to me in this conversation so far that I want to emphasize is grace. There's been a lot of grace we've had to extend, especially learning technology, working together, and it's just been great to see our community just really focus on extending grace to one another, because it's not going to be perfect. We're all learning and we're learning together. So Kim mentioned these circumstances driving us to be creative, but they've also driven us to collaborate more and communicate more and just really learn to love each other well and serve each other well. And it's been great, even with the technology changes. This may be our plan today, but it could change tomorrow. And so just being ready and being flexible and being gracious has been very helpful to those pivots and those changes we've had to make. So that's where we are now in terms of technology. That's what we're working through. And hopefully the plan we have in place will, come to fruition. But if it doesn't, we'll go back to the drawing board and we'll revisit things again. But for now, that's what we're looking at: Seesaw, Google Classrooms, and RenWeb working together.
Can I just jump in? And one of the things that's great about that is that it makes it easier for the teachers because the grade book is linked, and what Tammy was saying, but it also is, especially K-6 who didn't have Google Classroom in the fall, it's going to be much, much easier for you all to submit your work to your That was a really, that was a hard thing. We knew it was hard for you because the work that we got from you came in all sorts of interesting formats.
Right.
But it'll be all coming in one format through Google Classroom, and that will be streamlined for you and for the teacher. So I think it'll really clarify.
That's such an eloquent way that you said that, Gretchen. Like, yeah, the plethora of ways that it was received, and I could only imagine because I know
It was pretty fantastic on days.
Awesome. All right, so Tammy Keatts, I just want to make sure because you haven't had anything that you haven't added yet, and I want to get your take on something because I know you're a science, and I mean one of the concerns I know from a parent perspective, especially if there's labs or any type of hands-on, I know you had some amazing concepts and ideas and things. I know we're considering a lot of things for the fall, but I just wanted to have you chime in and just share. That'd be great.
So one thing that once we kind of got into the groove of things and everybody, I'm talking about this past year, learned like Google Classroom, learned the Zoom. I learned how to then share my screen. That was like a big deal, share my screen. So then what I started to do is I become more creative, and how biology works is, and chemistry too, is it's separated into units where they do all meld together, but not as much as I had them do this particular year. So we ended, when we ended in school, in the classroom, and went to distance learning, we were on like the human anatomy part. And so what I did was I knew we were going to kind of run out of time for ecology. So once we got to integumentary system, I taught them about homeostasis and integumentary system. But then we pulled up the EPA website on UV index. And so I tied in like global warming issues, UV index, and integumentary system, like skin cancer and that kind of thing. So my background is in medicine. I'm a physical therapist. So it all kind of went together, and it was my favorite lecture or lab that I've done, I think, in the 2 years that I was teaching at Rockbridge. It was amazing. And even more amazing was after, it took about an hour, and I warned them ahead of time, this would be about an hour because it was very interactive. And that's the other different thing than in the classroom, is it does take longer on Zoom because the way I hold a classroom, and probably every other teacher at Rockbridge, is a lot of discussion. I usually don't stand in front of the class and just lecture to the students. So that took a lot of getting used to in a Zoom realm. Like at first it was crickets. And that I was like, oh, this is tough. This is going to be tough. But I think once the students began understanding how Zoom worked, that is one thing. If we do have to go to distance learning, I have some better ideas to keep the discussion going. But the students will have to get used to a little bit longer than the 48 minutes that we have in the classroom, because it does take a little longer. But I think the learning is so much better when that happens. And another very interesting thing I wanted to add on to the beginning, and I didn't get a chance to chime in, was because I teach 10th and 11th graders, most of my interactions are with the students and not as much the parents. So I think the rapport that I had going into distance learning with the students was priceless, because they called me, like they would call me on the telephone and they would just discuss, you know, it didn't always have to do with what we were learning in school. Like, so then they would email me, and there was just so much back and forth, and I could kind of tell if the student was a little struggling because I already knew them. I knew their background, I knew the student, so I could, you know, reach out to that student if I saw something a little different than I saw all year. So as an upper school, like 10th, 11th grade teacher, that was probably the most rewarding part of remote learning, is that student-teacher relationship just got deeper. Like I would, you know, I would always start the Zoom meeting, and we would not even talk about school yet, like nothing that we were learning. I'd ask them what they were doing. Exercise is my big thing. Like I'd ask them, like, how are you getting outside? Are you exercising? Because I run, I swim, I do all, you know, I do all that. So I would, and they already knew all that about me. So they just had so much fun talking about that. And the day I did one Zoom meeting, it was supposed to end in an hour. It went to an hour and 40 minutes. Like the students just like, they kept talking and talking and talking. And we just talked about, my sons kept coming in. They're like, Mom, I need your help. Are you still on your Zoom meeting? It's like, yes, I'm still on my Zoom meeting. So that was just fantastic. So I think I went off track. So I think going into the fall, what we're going to do is even in the classroom, because my classes are chemistry and biology, and I'm a physical therapist, like I said. So I'm a hands-on kinesthetic type of teacher. So we will have to do like virtual labs. Like whatever we do, even if we have to have a shutdown, if I have a lab planned the next day, we can still continue with that lab. And I can't have students in close contact in the classroom either. So I do have to be creative in labs and still giving them the experience, because I really feel very strongly, especially with biology and chemistry, to keep it hands-on in this realm, keep it interactive with them. And we're going to do that through virtual labs.
Wonderful. Love that. Some of the things you said there, I just want to make sure we hone in on. It's that whole intentionality that happens here. I feel like everyone here kind of expressed it, where it's like we really had to hone in on getting very intentional in order to make sure things were getting executed. And I think that's another thing that is just so amazing, which kind of leads me to the next question that I'm going to put out there. And it's almost, you know, the next thing to think about. It's like, why can we, or how can we look at this in a way that there's a lot of opportunity? Like, why is this actually an opportunity for us to take on and actually grow, which I feel like you guys have already kind of expressed some of that, but let's just dive in a little bit more about that. So, you know, things like, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, because we were talking about this stuff before, honing in on the basics of things like streamlining, and Royce said this, like all of the extra, so that we can get down to the roots and to the real thing that we need to get down to is one. And I think that's one thing that this experience has taught us. So moving forward, when we reopen in live instruction, I think that's going to be even more paramount. But what other things do you guys think? Like, why do you think this is an opportunity for us here to grow and really hone in on the things that we do really well here at Rockbridge?
Yeah, there was something that Tammy was just talking about in her initial, classes, right? Talking about you've got a screen with a bunch of students and crickets, nothing's happening. And I think this is, it's not a directly applicable to our education and what we are attempting to teach in one way. But I think the fact that if God so wills it that we have to shut down again, and we have to go online. One of the side benefits that's beginning to happen is students, kids are being forced to use technology as a tool, which that's what technology is supposed to be. That's the word. It's built right into the word technology. And yet the vast majority of their interactions with technology have to do with entertainment, have to do with, feed me, right? What if this bores me, I just move on to the next channel. If this bores me, I move on to the next song, or I play the next game. And 1 hour with me or 2 hours with me online a week is not going to cure that. It's not going to cure much of anything, I don't think. But the cumulative effect of at least beginning to change the interaction of students with this technology is at least one really excellent side benefit, because technology shouldn't be the enemy. It only becomes the enemy when we let it run us and we fail to think about what it's supposed to do. And forcing students into a place where they have to interact just like we've been interacting in a classroom, and where they have to talk to each other, and where they have to get on a computer, that changes their experience of that technology. And again, that's not what we've set out as a school to do, except in the sense that we desire to take every thought captive and how we think about our technology. So I want to make the claim that going online and using distance learning in the fall will suddenly revolutionize. If nothing else, it may cause them to be exhausted of technology, and just for relief, they may go outside and go for a run instead of getting on Instagram. I'm not really sure that happens, but it could happen. But that's one aspect of this that I have appreciated, is at least students are getting a lot of screen time, but that screen time is deliberate and it's directed in ways that it wasn't necessarily before. So there's one great opportunity we have, and hopefully that will equip them once they leave to continue to use this technology to extend our reach for the gospel and to extend it outward from where we are, and to think of computers and the cell phone and everything else in that way.
As tools. Yes, Kim.
I just wanted to jump into that, as well as just a matter of an appreciation of all of our community, how important community is. Face-to-face interaction. It's one of those things where we've taken it for granted for so many years. Kids being in the classroom, we just think, of course, that's what we do. This is how it is. And when we haven't been able to have it, I notice in my home with my kids, boy, they're starved for it. They realize we're built for community. And so I have to say that it's really wonderful to see them want it and know that it's worthy of protecting, it's worthy of working at. And so as much as they might want to be behind that screen, and when we can be together, maybe they will choose to be together instead, because of how much more beautiful it is. And so I've found that just a thankfulness piece of being able to be together in community. And honestly, I just feel like we need to really work against the idea that this is school, this could be school, this over Zoom, or this could be community, even in our churches, right? That we only get church through a computer, that we only get learning through this way. No, we learn from another. Iron sharpens iron. And yes, it can do it in Zoom, and we will make it happen. But boy, it's beautiful when we can be face to face. And so I've found that it's an opportunity to be thankful for our time in the classroom and our time with one another in new ways.
Love that. I'm trying to think, Roy, did you want to add to that? Because this kind of ties very nicely to the next question I have, but I didn't know if you had anything to add.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
Awesome. So that brings me to the next question, which is, why try to be open at all? And I mean, Kim, you segued that so beautifully, but let's just start off with, aside from, aside from now the want and the yearning for it, there's this whole concept of just being more flexible and just having this ability to feel for your, but I mean, you guys chime in, because I could talk about why I think it's a great point to be open at all, but you guys
Yes,
definitely.
we miss our students. We really, really, really miss our students and our parents. We really, really miss them. That's why.
Yeah, I would just add that I think overall we are learning a lot, and the Lord is causing us to say, hey, take this technology and use it for good, and here's how I can prepare your community to do that. But at the same time, being in the classroom is best. That is best for, especially for a classical education. And so in Christian discipleship, being in front of one another is best. And Kim spoke to that very eloquently. And so thankfully, because we're a small school, we're not a big public school system whose constituency is large and broad and is like turning a big ship. We can be more nimble in how we carry things out. It doesn't mean that we should be unsafe. We've got to keep our eye on where things go over the next few weeks. But we can be more nimble, and we can pivot and change more quickly. And so that's what we need to choose to do. Even if we can get, Myrna, even if we can get 2 weeks in the first 2 weeks in the classroom, that will allow teacher and student to build some relationship, and it will allow us to quickly get the students up to speed on the technology and how it's going to be used now. And so that'll be a high priority. Now, I say that we want to be wise, and we're going to watch and see what the circumstances bring over the next month and a half. And if we can't, we can't, and we're going to roll with it and do it. But the highest priority, I think, is to get in front of one another.
Love that. I mean, what I love about this too, I mean, just from a parent's perspective, like at the end of the day, what is it that I want, or how is it that I want to feel? I want to feel as if, regardless of whatever goes down, because we are in this state of influx, it's like, I know that, school administration and teachers are working together to make sure that they're going to ensure that my child's going to get the best education that they can give. And then through the fact of the discipleship of it all, it's even going to come forward even tenfold more. So, I mean, to me, that is a relieving feeling, and something that I think all of us as parents would want to hear and want to feel. So you're doing this right now. Thank you. I'm grateful for this conversation, because it's allowing for that to come through. So thanks so much for that. Okay, so now we're going to think of contingency, right? So what would force us to close? Because I appreciate the fact that, yes, we're an independent school, so we don't have to follow the public school situation. But let's just talk about what would force us to close, and what that could look like.
Yeah, well, certainly if we were told to close, or if if the situation became so obvious, we're going to do what's wise. And I think that's the thing, is that we need to kind of wait and see. And obviously this week and the trending of this week has been very concerning for everyone. And just know we're not taking that lightly, even though we're saying we're opening, and we are. We're moving in that direction. We know that the Lord could change the situation, and so we're preparing for that. I think it's going to be wisdom applied in the circumstance. I think the other thing that I want parents to know is that consistency is going to be important, and I don't want this to, as we get into the school year, I don't want this to be like the perpetual snow day morning, where everyone's waiting. Are we going to open today? And then the next day, are we going to open today? That would be exhausting for everyone. So we're going to try to make decisions that are going to be lasting decisions that make sense for folks, for families, because we know that parents are working. They've got to make plans for themselves. But we aren't ready to say that we're not opening yet. I really think it's important to leave that open for now.
Yeah. No, I think that's smart. Because again, this was a 2-week plan, guys. in March. Like we all thought 14 days and something else was going to give. So as you can see, it's totally something that's beyond any of our control. God has this and God has our back. So we just kind of have to roll with it, which is how I feel. But
Myrna, I would also say that when we get into the school year, there's a big decision tree that is being built right now in the task force and everything, as far as how do you make decisions once you're in school and someone gets exposed to COVID, someone has COVID and all that. That's a big decision tree that hasn't come to full flower yet. We're working that out. But we want to get that so that it makes sense, that it's wise and logical, and then we'll communicate that to the family so they know what to expect. It'll never be able to incorporate every circumstance. So there's going to be wisdom, there's going to be trust. Your headmaster's going to make decisions that a family will agree with or won't agree with, but at least you'll know this is how we're making our decisions, and we're going to seek to be as wise as possible.
No, that's awesome. Awesome. All right. So I wanted to make sure for the people who are here, the attendees, you guys can come into the chat. So if you do have questions, because we're coming and rolling up to the end of this, can you put them in? Because if we have time, we do want to try to answer some of them. But I do have one final question that I'm just going to pose and put out there. So get in the chats, fill in your questions, like I said, and if they do not get responded to here, definitely it's going to be forwarded to administration so that they will have an opportunity to review your questions and be able to respond to it. So make sure that you do that. But the last question I have for all of you guys is, how do you character train from distance? And I mean, I want Roy to kind of kick this off, and then, you guys could definitely chime in from there. But Roy, tell us, share your wisdom on this, because I know.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that character training it's not just a list that you check off or a set of motions that you do. Our teachers are character training, and I think that's been evident in how they've shared about their journey in this and their interactions with the students. They're character training all the time. And, a lot of character is caught more than taught. And modeling that. I mean, our teachers, frankly, were character training on the day of 9/11 when we had to gather the students together in our classrooms and pray. And they saw on our faces and in our actions the way that we handled that situation. They see it in the way we handle late homework and interact with them on it. And they see the times when we need to apologize and ask forgiveness for things that we've done. And so all of that is constantly happening. And just because we're not in the classroom doesn't mean it's not happening. It's happening in our communications over digitally as well. There are the moments when we're pulling them aside and having the one-on-one conversation about something that has happened in their lives or in the classroom, and we need to talk about that specifically. But more often than not, it's reflected in the day-to-day interactions that's happening. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And I think really these folks bore that out in the conversation more than anything.
No, truly. But you guys, do you have anything to add? Because you guys did. I mean, but there's always room if you guys wanted to share, because we are getting some questions in.
I'll just put my parent hat on and say, it was very important to me, and I really appreciated the communication from the teachers to me about my students, my kids in the classroom, and then through distance learning, just the things that they were seeing, maybe some areas where my child was slacking off through distance learning that they were doing fine in the classroom. So just those emails, those phone calls from the teachers to the parents, I think is very critical as well, because when they're at school, they're with their teachers most of the day, but at home, they're with us most of the time, right? So as Roy mentioned, character training is always going on, even at home. They're watching how their parents respond to the comments from the teacher, to their grades. They're watching our response. And so character training is going on there. And it's really the parents' responsibility before God ultimately anyway. So the communication from the teachers. I really appreciated them just keeping us in the loop with what they were seeing and what was going on. So
Love that. You're triggering something for me, because I'm thinking even for me, and I'm going to speak, Kim, I'm going to put you on blast real quick, because we had an instance where, you know, and to everybody's point here, yes, character training was an ongoing thing, but I had an instance where, you know, the communication that I had with Mrs. Williams through one little instance totally like influenced Jordan, my daughter, in such a positive light that, you know, to this day, like I still am so grateful for. So the constant communication, the stepping up in things that, you know, were related to the assignment, but it was like things outside of that that were also discussed, also reviewed, also prayed upon. I mean, we prayed together during one of our sessions, like alone. And I just want to say I'm so grateful for all of that. So to Tammy's point, to Roy's point, the communication that was consistent in looking not just at the educational side of things, but the character training side of things was paramount. So thank you for that. Okay, questions. We have a few minutes. We have like 5 minutes. So first question, can you explain how an individual child who must stay home because either they are sick or their parent is sick will be able to join a Zoom when school is open or they can't be there and they can't be there? And just in case. So I think they're thinking of this dual system situation, like when school is in session and they're live, how's that going to be worked on from a distance?
And we're calling this a virtually connected student, right? Because they're at home and the rest of the class is on site and is doing their thing. Right now, the teaching task force is really tackling this, because if you can imagine, this is a scenario that is fraught with possibility. I mean, there's tons of possibility for what we can do, but it's also, we need to make sure that it's going to serve the teacher well, the way we set this up. But the idea right now is that for parts of the day or at various points in the day, the at-home student will connect with the class just for a little bit of community, but also be able to connect with the teacher. And don't forget that Google Classroom is going to be the ubiquitous tool there. And so the teacher is going to be constantly using that. So everything that is assigned and going on in the classroom is going to be on Google Classroom and available. And then the student will, asynchronously or without the class, be going off on their own during the day and doing work. So it'll be a combination of the two. But I think that what's becoming clear is having the student just kind of with a camera watching the class all day long is not going to be very helpful to anyone. So it won't be that, but it also won't be totally removed and not connected at all from the school. And Gretchen's been working a lot on this. So go ahead, Gretchen.
Just to keep in mind that there's actually layers in that as well. So you can have the virtually connected student who's really sick, right? So that child isn't going to be able, this person has a high fever and is quarantined at home and isn't able to do their schoolwork at that moment. But you can have the quarantined virtually connected student who is well, but maybe their mom is sick, right? Okay, well, that student maybe can do some of the work, but can't do all of the work because they would need their mom to help them, depending on how old they are, right? Or you could have the family that's all well, they're just quarantined. So do you see how, even though virtually connected is one basket of student, it's actually fairly complex even within that. And then if you take that complexity, I'm not trying to, but as you think through all the layers, like you take that complexity and then you take that complexity and put it into Tammy's lab class, that looks really different than if you put it into JD's literature class. And that looks really different than if you put it into Kim's 4th grade class. And it's really different than if you put it into my kindergarten class. So one virtually connected student can look really different depending on their home context, right? What that is. So imagine all the different versions of that, and then connect all the different versions of that to all the different versions of the classroom context. And so it's not just this simple connection, it's this web of possibilities. So Grace, we're going to need to take it one connection at a time and say, in this instance, this works. But in this instance, this works. Because we're not going to be able to say that there's just so many, right? Every family is going to be different and every classroom is going to be different. But we're working on it.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the main things that the task force is working on right now, because we want to walk into August preparing our teachers in a way that's not going to overwhelm them. And so we're working on systems that will help this to be smooth for folks and serve our families. But it'll be a combination of those two, connected during parts of the day for community and direction, and then off on their own working.
Right. And then the amount of synchronous work, meaning the child at home is doing it while the students at school are doing it, versus asynchronous work. In other words, they pick it up later and do it when they can. Again, that's part of that decision making because of the contexts on both ends.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because one size doesn't fit all. And I mean, even down to, I mean, we're thinking so diligently about COVID, but it could just be like a child has, something else, like, another sickness. The beauty of this is, as opposed to getting the packet when your child is sick and they're like, having to go through it on their own, having this flexibility of the ability to be able to virtually somehow still engage, connect, and work within these different webs that we're creating for COVID, all these contingencies, that's pretty powerful in itself in order to keep the train moving. So that's something that I think is pretty important to see and to actually like reflect on, because it's a possibility as well. All right, so guys, it is 8:01, and I don't want to, I mean, there are a couple of other questions in here, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, because you guys took an hour out of your evening schedule to be with us, and I'm so thankful for that. But don't think that this conversation is ending. Don't think that it's over. Absolutely not. If there is any other questions while we're closing up here, please put them in the chat, because it will be sent to the administration team, so they will be able to respond. Otherwise, I wanted to thank you humbly to say that I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to act as Oprah once more, because that's my wish in life, is to be a
Talk show
host one day. So this is like living vicariously through that role.
Could I just say, I know that the questions are really important to folks, because I've been receiving some of them via email today in advance of this. And so our desire is to put together an FAQ document that will group together the questions that are similar and try to get that information out. So I don't want people to be disappointed who came in with specific questions and wanted to know. We will continue to roll out this information as it firms itself up in the continuing kind of Rockbridge Ready little short videos, and also in print form as well, and FAQs will be part of that.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you for that. All right, guys, so thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm so grateful. Thanks, guys. You guys were awesome.
Thank you, Myrna.
You're so welcome. Have a good evening. Oh, thank you for putting this together. Yay, you guys, thank you for all your hard work. That's what's coming through. So yes, we will talk soon.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.